Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome. I'm actually thrilled. We're doing kind of a head count. We've got about 60 people here so far, and I'm thrilled that you're all here joining us tonight in our Wayne County Historic Courtroom for a little history of Wayne County itself. I want to introduce Peter Becker and Linus Myers, who agreed tonight to come here and give us a little bit more information to the general public. And I'll tell you how this whole idea got started. A couple of months ago, March 21st, which is the official anniversary of Wayne County. Does anybody know the year? You don't, not you two. I know. 1798. So it was a Thursday, it was our public meeting, and we said, oh my gosh, March 21st is going to be the 226th anniversary of Wayne County, and Peter attends our public meetings as a member of the press with the Tri-County Independent. Prior to that, we gave him a call and said, hey, Peter, would you consider possibly just giving a brief history of Wayne County, something that we can share because the press does cover our meetings. Blue Ridge Cable sends a cameraman. Again, Tri-County Independent is there. Would you mind giving us a 5-minute history on Wayne County? It's very difficult to do a 5-minute topic on anything, right? So Peter did, and I thought it was wonderful. We all did. It was really very interesting. There was an awful lot that I didn't know. And after that, we kept talking about how wonderful it was and said, hey, would you consider doing this for the public in our courtroom sometime in the future? And here we all are. I also want to thank Jim Hamill here, who's here from Pocono Mountain Visitors Bureau, who's actually going to record this as well, so we have it for all posterity. But again, I'm just thrilled that we've got a great turnout tonight. I welcome you to your courthouse, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter, and I got to give you this fancy.
Add to that, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody that came tonight. It is really humbling and a blessing to see so many people. I certainly know only probably half of you. Unless, of course, I probably need new glasses. I probably know everybody. I'm sorry, but no, I really thank you for coming. It's really wonderful, and I really thank the Wayne County Commissioners for this opportunity, and for the Historical Society too, because it was, 10 years ago actually. The Historical Society asked me to be the county historian, which was very humbling because there were people who know more than I do. But then they recommended me to the commissioners, and then the commissioners appointed me. And so it's very thankful for this opportunity. And really looking forward to hearing what Linus has to say too. Linus is truly the unofficial but well-deserved courthouse historian because of his long career here and his interest in history. He was court administrator. He ended up his career as district justice, and he's officially retired, but he's back tonight and share some of his knowledge. It's great. I also want to say it's great that you have this at 6 o'clock because it's dinner time. That way, if we go too far over and you haven't had dinner yet, you'll surely let me know, and you'll be starting to get angry with me. So that's great. I want to make you too hungry. And then I also want to say it's 200 county being over 200 years old. I thought, how we ever 5 minutes is one thing, but an hour to do 200 years, you're going to keep you here till breakfast. But now, how we narrowed it down to Wayne County's origins, its county seats, and the courthouses. I also quickly met, just for my own edification, I just really thankful to be in this main courtroom because my grandfather was Chester A. Garrett, attorney at large, and my mother's father. And Chester Garrett was the district attorney of Wayne County in the mid-1920s, right in the height of Prohibition. And he had many a case right in here. It's exciting for me to, think about that. He had quite a few cases concerning moonshining, which is interesting. But we'll get into that now. Anyway, we'll start out. This historic courthouse you're sitting in today, this historic courtroom, isn't the first one that Wayne County ever had. It's actually, you notice we said county seats and courthouses. We've had several. In fact, Wayne County, Pennsylvania, has had 6 different courthouses. And probably, I didn't count them up, about 5 county seats, maybe 4. It's amazing. Anyway, we'll get to and explain what happened here. There was generations that were of the 1840s through the 1870s. People living at that time were well aware of another courthouse that sat right in front of this one on the lawn, what's now the lawn between here and the sidewalk was the first courthouse in Honesdale, and it looked quite different in those days. It was a beautiful big wooden courthouse. You'll see a picture of it soon, and with a big cupola on it. And right across the street was the public square, is what they called it then. And it had a fence around it, because one reason is some people would bring their cows there to graze.
Peter, are we off to a different picture here now?
Oh, we're not showing a picture yet. Are we showing a picture? Okay,
Are we? Or-
not yet.
Oh,
But you can have it, you could leave it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, the early courthouse, what I just mentioned, arrived and went in storms of controversy. The first one was over the removal of the county seat to Honesdale. The second controversy was over a big controversy in Wayne County over whether they should replace that wooden courthouse with a new brick one. A lot of people thought it was a huge waste of money. Others say, oh, you needed a new one. In the American Revolution, following the Revolution, Wayne County at that time was a dense virgin wilderness, which was slowly being cut down, and people were logging, sending the logs in rafts down the Delaware River. That's the scene we had up here. This was part of Northampton County. In those days, Pennsylvania's counties were very large. The county seat of Northampton was and still is in Easton, and that's a long way from up here. Even today, it takes quite a drive. Could you imagine back then? It was practically unreachable for the settlers that were up here in the northern hinterlands. Almost 100 miles between what is now Honesdale and Easton, as the crow flies. The few settlers that were here, if they had to go to court, they faced a long journey, maybe probably from up here, probably 2 to 3 days going by horse or walking, or maybe some even took a raft or down the Delaware. If they walked or took the horse, it was perilous trails, old Indian trails. In the beginning, cougars, wolves, and bears may have met them along the way, along the dark forest. The Pennsylvania legislature gradually started subdividing to make more manageable sized counties. March 21st, 1798, Wayne County was carved out of Northampton, but it included all of what is today Wayne and Pike County and part of northern Monroe County. Still really large. It was named for General Mad Anthony Wayne of the Revolutionary War fame. In fact, anybody have an idea how many counties in United States are named Wayne County? There were 16. There still are 16. I counted them up, and we were the third. The board, they set up a board of four trustees from the area to find a suitable county seat. They picked Milford, which is already an established village. It actually just got underway in the 1790s. It was already a budding, growing village because they had several mills, hence the name Milford, along two cascading streams. There were waterfalls. They reached the Delaware River. So Milford was the place to have the county seat. The first court of Wayne County, and as you see the picture up here, was first held in the home of George Buchanan, right up here on the screen, on September 10th, 1798. Obviously, it's still here. I took the picture, and I didn't go back in time. The small house with 2 fireplaces is standing at the edge of the village on Route 209 on the south side of Sawkill Creek. You can drive right by and see it today. The National Park Service owns it. There was still a large way from the northern reaches. Milford didn't create. The settlers up here were not at all happy with Milford. An act was passed on April 1st, 1799, temporarily moving the county seat further north to Wilsonville until public buildings could be erected within 4 miles of Dyeberry Forks. And that meant the virtually unsettled valley where the Lackawanna River now meets Dyeberry Creek beneath a granite, rugged gaze of a great cliff that someday somebody would call Irving. Of course, that Dyeberry Forks is Honesdale. It was yet future. And you could show picture 2. It'll be just up there briefly, just to illustrate. Well, it's just a picture of the cliff. Yeah, I just thought I'd show you a picture of the cliff. And that was here then too. But Wilsonville, you might as well switch Linus, you might as well go to picture 3, the third one. Wilsonville was situated what is now the north end of Lake Wallenpaupack near Holly. Today it's underwater. This little hamlet, it was in a wilderness where the falls, the Wallenpaupack Falls, were turning water wheels and making, sawing wood and grinding grain. Court was first held in a tavern called the Mansion House in Wilsonville. The first court session was held May 6, 1799. Of course, this picture is taken in around 100 years after that, around 1900. And I did read somewhere, I'm not sure if it's speculation or not, but the large White House on the right I read it may have been it. It was around that time it actually burned down. And it was a tavern and obviously probably a hotel, a lodging place. A year later, this was, as you know, this was only temporary because there was such dissatisfaction. A year later, in 1800, a site was finally chosen within 4 miles of Dyeberry Forks. It was where the village of Bethany would become the next county seat. Bethany did not exist yet. There was a howl of protest from Milford. It took another 5 years, however, before court actually went there. Trustees had been negotiating terms with large landowners. Some of them, however, had no clear title to the land. But they found Henry Drinker of Philadelphia, who won the day, when he offered about 1,000 acres of his wilderness land, which encompassed the hill where Bethany would be. He was chosen over another guy, Edward Tiggleman of Philadelphia. He had another 1,000 acres around Cherry Ridge. The site was finally picked on May 15, 1800, accompanied by a surveyor land agent, Jason Torrey, who was appointed as the trustee's clerk. On May 19th, they put a large stake that was driven in the ground for the new county seat. And in that June, they chose the site for the public square and a courthouse and a jail and a layout of streets for as many as 254 houses. I'm sure they had a lot of lumbering to do as well. Lots were advertised for sale in Easton and Philadelphia. The sale actually started in that interim county seat, the tavern in Wilsonville. Roads were very scarce. One of the first ones was the Bethany-Digman Choice Turnpike. This is one of the principal routes that connected this new county seat to the outside world. It started down on what is now Dingman's Ferry. It ran along what is now Route 739, roughly parallel. Route 6, Long Ridge Road in Wayne County, and went through the present site of Honesdale on Riverside Drive. That's a very old section of road. And the road went through Glen Dyeberry Cemetery, Fair Avenue, and Miller Road, the road that winds up the hill past the fairgrounds, on the way to Bethany. So it'll be fun just to drive that someday and go right through the cemetery. You're actually on a very old road. The frame of the first courthouse in Bethany, and you're looking at this courthouse, 36 by 32 feet, was raised on September 5th of 1800. A year later, Torrey said it was all done and the jail was almost done. There's some discrepancy in the old records, and I don't know if anyone's ever resolved it, over just how fast this was being done. However, it was in this time frame. Torrey built his house nearby in what is now the Methodist Church. While the proper buildings were being arranged, they had to still have court somewhere, so they put it back in Milford, much to their happiness, in September 1802, and it didn't get back to Bethany until May of 1805. On May 6th, court was first held, not in the courthouse, but in Torrey's home. I'm not sure why. Bethany was not popular down south in Pike County, what's now Pike. There was a movement. Some of them wanted to have it in Blooming Grove. Finally, the argument over these long distances was settled when on March 26, 1814, the state legislature created Pike County, and the county seat was in Milford. So all that was done. February 1815, we're looking at this picture here. That's a beautiful picture. Okay. This house it was actually moved across the street. It was was sitting on what is now the park up at Bethany, and that was the first courthouse. It's been changed a lot, I read, but they moved it across the street to build another, because they wanted to build a bigger courthouse. It became a private residence, a store, and a post office for many years, and I understand it's owned by Kathy Schlosser. I'm not sure if she's still or not, but that's what I heard. Okay, where was I? February 1815, yes, picture 5, please. A larger courthouse in Bethany was planned. That first one was sold for $346 to Walter Weston, who moved it over across the street. Court was first held in the unfinished, new, larger wooden courthouse. Yep, there it is. On August 25th, 1817. It had a beautiful belfry. There's no photograph of it for good reason. It was gone before cameras were around. But that's the only only picture we have of it, which was made much later, when it finally became a college, as I'll be mentioning soon. But you can visualize this on the lawn of Bethany, on the village green. Today, in 1823, they were concerned, must have been concerned back then, it was wooden and maybe there'll be a fire danger. So they made what they called the brick fireproof, the picture 6. Picture 6. This building was erected in the back of the courthouse to store the county records and several of the county offices. And you know it today as the Bethany Public Library. The Women's Club has met there, Historical Society, and it's still the place where Bethany Council meetings meet. And they've been doing that since the 1830s. In 1998, this very historic day of the bicentennial of Wayne County, Judge Robert Conway brought court back to Bethany for the day, and actually had defendants up there. It was really exciting. I was there for the Wayne Independent. The courthouse was, the courthouse was still in Bethany, on a hill, 3 miles north of Dyeberry Fork. All seemed settled and happy. They thought that was it, the picture 7, till the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company comes along in the mid-1820s and changes everything. They opened a canal and gravity railroad to ship their coal. They started a small village around this, and they renamed it Honesdale for the company's first president, Philip Hone. Honesdale was quickly growing in importance. Soon it seemed more important than Little Bethany. Of course, that caused some upset up in Bethany. Jason Torrey had surveyed and laid out the lots in the northern half of Honesdale. He acquired the acreage from William Schoonover. The canal company bought the southern half from the Kimball family, and the dividing line between each two sections met in the middle of what is now the park. In fact, maybe right now you can imagine right between the eyes of the Civil War statue. That line went right through. Of course, the statue wasn't there yet. Torrey and a D&H company donated the land for the park. In 1841, the decision was made to shift the county seat to Honesdale. You can imagine the upset, the jealousy up in Bethany. Petitions were gathered and taken to Harrisburg, where a plot was put into motion in a legislative session of 1840-41. Senator Ebenezer Kingsbury of Honesdale championed the push to relocate the county seat. The detractors to this saw it as a devious trick, and they pushed to prevent the governor from signing the bill, but they didn't do any good. May 4th, 1841, the county commissioners met the officials appointed by the governor. They fixed the location of a new county building on 3rd Street, which was renamed Court Street, facing the public square. Senator Kingsbury, he lived right across the park, directly across, at what it became 914 Church Street, and he got to see his new courthouse, his new county seat. That address is near dear to my heart. It's where I grew up. It's the red brick house over there. Picture 8, please. Charles Jamison, a Honesdale contractor, built this courthouse you see up there in 1843. The commissioners paid him $11,500. County records were transferred down from Bethany on August 21st before the building was done. The first court was held there in December. The most complete description we found of this long ago landmark was from an anonymous letter writer in the Wayne Independent who wrote in 1878. The writer was lamenting, or he was sorrowful over the recent decision to replace the old courthouse with a new brick one. He was upset. And he described the place. The old courthouse was a good one, good enough for many years to come. It stood high on a high, good foundation, having a good and convenient basement for coal and wood. The body of the building was in good shape. Siding and roof were in perfect order, well painted outside. Large white granite steps led to the main entrance from the street. There was a large commodious rooms on the first floor for the grand and petit jury, sheriff office, and large library room, larger than they needed, and they had extra room for a lawyer and a justice of the peace. The second story, or audience room, was reached by a flight of stairs at the right and left. The courtroom was large and furnished with conveniently arranged seats, well painted and varnished, jury box well furnished with tables and seats, and it was a substantial and ornamental railing around for the bar or the lawyers. The witness box, the judge's bench, were next to each other, and there was a room set aside for female witnesses and a room specially set apart for the members of the bar. The floors of the courtroom and aisle were durably matted, windows were adjusted and pulleys, and there was a large central ventilator on the wall overhead. Oh, you can keep it there. That's great.
That's good.
Yeah, this is what I want. And then the last thing he said, the whole was surmounted by a well-proportioned cupola in which was a bell that could be heard at a distance of 3 miles. It seems that that was all that was necessary for the courthouse to last for many years. I strongly suspect that the bell that's out on the lawn today was the same one that was in the 1843 courthouse. Looking up at old Honesdale newspapers in 1880 when they were changing to the new one, I found evidence to that fact that makes me think that. But this court, I found out, researching this bell, I found out the county commissioners bought this bell in 1847 from the Merrill Bell Foundry in Waterville, New York, which is near Albany, for $136. In today's money, that would be $5,215. They probably brought the bell down on a wagon and maybe down to Kingston from Albany, and they probably put it on a canal boat. That's what I suspect. So when you go down and look at that bell, it has a lot of history to it. Okay, picture 10. Many public meetings and events were held in the Honesdale's first courthouse. Maybe like this, maybe they talked about history, I don't know. But on Tuesday morning, July 9, 1844,
Hang on a sec. There
that's
we go.
okay, Honesdale's courtroom was packed. That's right, was packed.
Is that right, Pete?
Yep. There was 800 people here to hear a gifted young Democratic political orator, Gansvoort Melville. He was a diplomat from England. The Wayne County Herald reported the assembly included women for what was believed to be the first time in Wayne County that women attended a political meeting. About time. Melville was the brother to the author Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. When he was done speaking, it excited a long and loud, thunderous cheers. The old courthouse was the setting for many political rallies and meetings of Wayne County Democrats, the Wayne County Whigs, but not the Republicans because their party hadn't been formed yet. In January 1844, there was a huge meeting of Democrats in the courthouse to show their support for President Martin Van Buren. His 1840 election defeat, they called it a national calamity in the press. Van Buren was up for re-election. He wanted to run again, but he lost to James Polk, so that's why they had their rally here. The Herald reported the Wayne County Temperance Convention also was held here in the old courthouse at early candlelight, Wednesday evening in January 27, 1847. Picture 11. You're up. Honesdale's newspapers carried some biting articles about the conduct of some of their county judges. We don't do that anymore. An account in the Wayne County Herald, November 6, 1856, that's really kind of funny. In those days, Honesdale had 2 main newspapers. Eventually, soon they had 3. anyway, and they would poke fun at each other, and I think it was believed it was partly on purpose. They would make fun of each other in the editorial page just to get each other going, and it boosted subscriptions and newspaper sales. They were blasting each other back and forth about different things. Very entertaining. Anyway, an account in the Herald on November 6, 1856, blasted Associate Judge Francis Penniman for agreeing to hold court November 3rd to consider the application of citizenship of 200 foreigners who paid for naturalization papers, but then the judge failed to show up. Many of the applicants had traveled 20 to 30 miles to appear in court in Honesdale that morning, and they waited till the night, only to be disappointed. In those days, there was an overnight journey for many Wayne County residents, and many of them would have had to pay for a hotel room, unless they had family here. The courthouse was much closer to the street.
All right.
Anyway, the courthouse was much smaller, and it was in the backyard. They used it for a series of county fairs. There was a traveling circus and even a hanging. Not in that order. Prior to the current successful Wayne County Fair, which started in 1862, they had the Wayne County Agricultural Society started having annual fairs from 1848 to 1855 behind the courthouse. They also had exhibits in the courtroom. Now this fellow here is Tom Thumb. There were numerous traveling shows and circuses in the 1840s and 50s that came to the courthouse. On Saturday, July 14, 1849, under the management of P.T. Barnum, Tom Thumb, who was made famous for his dwarfism, had performed before royalty across Europe. He entertained at the courthouse. He was under 3 feet tall. During afternoon and evening shows, he did songs, dances, impersonations of famous people, and he even dressed up as Greek statues. On July 1st of 1859, the Yankee Robson Circus came here, pitched their tents in the backyard, and one of their shows was an adaptation of Uncle Tom's Cabin, the famed anti-slavery story. They also had many a concert here at the courthouse, the old courthouse. The juvenile band was one of them. There was a harp concert, and there was a German singing society, and I'm sure many more. Now we're up to picture 13.
That's the courthouse, right?
Yeah. In February 1850, there was a huge rally at the courthouse calling for the preservation of the Union. When draft notices went out in 1862 for Wayne County men to serve during the Civil War, the courthouse was one of several places they could submit claims for exemption. They came before Charles Minor, who was a commissioner, and Dr. Consider King, a surgeon. Just a note about the picture. This is the only known photograph of the old courthouse. And you can see in the foreground's the park. You can see the fence that used to be there. And in the background, up and to the left, that's the old stone jail, which wasn't so old back then. And that's the main thing I'll say about that. Okay, the people were coming here hoping to get exempt from going into the draft for the Civil War. The Wayne County Herald wrote about it. The anxious crowds filled the main auditorium, whence they were called one by one to pass through the south apartment and across the balcony into the north room, where the commissioner and surgeon sat in state, and they applied their tape measure, their stethoscope, probes, and other instruments as the individual occasion required. Now this is good. I well remember hearing of one case in which the gruff old doctor trusted entirely to his eyesight and personal knowledge of the young man's health, who was ushered into his presence and passed him out with a cheerful assurance, "You needn't go to war. You'll be dead by Christmas anyhow." In that round, there were 700 men. Even though they tried to get out of it, they were drafted. The Civil War Memorial, honoring the 383 Wayne County sons who died in the war, was dedicated right across the street on September 9th of 1869. There were 7,000 people here, including Governor John Geary. Now to the hangings. There were 5 hangings of convicted murderers in Wayne County history. The first 2 were in Bethany. The third was outside the old 1843 courthouse, and the 5th was in 1887 behind this courthouse. I'm glad those days are over. September 29, 1848, a vagrant called Harris Bell was hung for first-degree murder and rape. Sheriff William Wood led the execution, and of course, when the verdict was heard, was announced, the bell in the cupola was rung. The Wayne County Herald reported the condemned on the gallows gave eloquent remarks of remorse and agreed to pray with the clergyman just before he died. The paper said it was a morbid public spectacle, though there was an attempt to conceal the gallows behind a roofless wooden enclosure.
I have no idea.
Uh-oh.
Not.
Oh, you can wait on it.
All right, that makes a lot.
It became a morbid public spectacle. They tried to hide the gallows behind a closure. A crowd strained to watch the solemn procession from the courthouse. Some clambered to the top of a fence and that was erected in the park to try to keep people from looking, but only to have the fence collapse and the people fell on the sidewalk. Harris Bell, who was being led to his execution, saw the whole thing and he smiled, the paper said. Others are sitting in roofs and in trees, and there was even a crowd up on the cliff looking down. Note, the new jail was built in 1859 and replaced the small wooden one. It cost $16,000. Concerns were raised in the 1850s over losing the wooden courthouse to a fire, and they had good reason. Honesdale had been rocked by numerous fires in the mid-19th century. There was infernos that took off entire sections of Main Street. Arson was frequently blamed. The Honesdale Fire Company in those days, they only had hand pumps and buckets. There was no steam pumper until the 70s. They also must have had the old wooden courthouse in Bethany on their mind, because after the county seat was moved down here, the old courthouse became a school. The dormitory by the way, was in the old brick fireproof. In 1848, they named it the University of Northern Pennsylvania, and they attached wings on either side. College was well underway when on April 19, 1857, it burned down in a snowstorm. Tragic loss. When the grand jury ruled on the courthouse's condition in Honesdale, they stated the courthouse could not protect public records and was not big enough. They erected well-lit and fireproof vaults adjacent to the office in a separate fireproof building. That was the advice. It was quoted, "We are of the opinion that should the courthouse be burned, every book and paper in the said vault would be burned and destroyed." The county treasurer, to protect his money vouchers, had to take them home at night. The year before, the jury said that the vault in the prothonotaria's office was so crowded with books and papers they had to move some to the grand jury room in open boxes. The vaults didn't even have locks. As a result, you should go to picture 14 if you could.
Where are we at?
14.
14. Which is what? That?
No.
That?
But that's 15. 14 is the one before it. No, they go in the other direction.
Back up?
Yeah, it's before that fireworks picture.
Well, there's the old courthouse. Then
That one.
no.
As a result, a new brick two-story county office building, which they also called the fireproof, was built in 1856. You could see it right there on the left in the distance background. That was the brick office building that they built. And it stood between the courthouse and what is now the Dimmick Mansion. Okay. Proposals were being made to build a new brick courthouse. Judges were informing the juries that it was poorly ventilated, not big enough. In 1867, a grand jury told the commissioners, you need to raise taxes to replace the courthouse. You'd think they would have built an annex in the back, although they probably wanted something more fireproof. And now, picture 15, that firework picture. An Independence Day mishap.
Paying attention here, folks.
18.
I hear this snicker.
It's almost time to hear from Linus, but not quite.
Sensitive guy here, Pete.
One more thing.
Sorry, Pete.
No, that's okay. This is July 4th, 1858. The fire concern became all the more clear. It turns out the current annual fireworks show that we set off around July 4th every year and enjoy, that started in 1976 as part of the nation's bicentennial, as if it was something they never did before. It's not true. They did it before. Back in the 1850s, they had fireworks. But thankfully, today's version is not nearly as eventful. A local attorney, Richard Crane, in 1858, chaired a committee planning the town's celebration of Independence Day. And now this puts us to shame. Things have changed a lot. I mean, this was an all-day affair. At sunrise, there was a 13-gun salute, ringing of bells, church bells, and music from the cliff. As part of the proceedings, at 10 a.m., there was a parade that started in front of the courthouse. It later came back to the courthouse, and in the backyard, they read the Declaration of Independence with a 22-gun salute, various games in the park for the kids, and adults probably, and dinner was held at the newly opened Allen House at 9th and Church Street, where the Dime Bank is today. That evening, they had bonfires on the hills, illumination of the park, and fireworks, and a hot air balloon launch from the cliff. Before it was over, the Honesdale Parade Band was going to play from the courthouse balcony. And then the Citizen newspaper wrote, "One of the rockets struck the old wooden courthouse. The head of the rocket passed completely through the siding and nearly set the courthouse on fire. 3 days later, the rocket was still stuck in the courthouse wall. Another rocket nearly struck a crowd of onlookers on Attorney Crane's front lawn at 910 Church Street." You know, he's the guy that coordinated this celebration. "It barely missed somebody's head and became lodged in the ground. Other rockets fell into other crowds, but the paper didn't mention any injuries. The Herald called for these fiery missiles to be directed towards some other open space. And lastly, during the ensuing controversy of whether to replace the courthouse, the Herald said in May 1877, somebody found a few charred chips were discovered in the back vestibule, smelling of kerosene oil. There was worry that an arsonist was around, so the commissioners quickly hired a night watchman." So with that, I will hand it over to my illustrious courthouse historian, Linus Myers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Linus Myers. I roamed the halls of this building for 43 years. The place is only 224 years old, so I've been here about a sixth of its existence, which is terrible to say. But I've been a history freak that whole time. I love dealing with this old building and the history behind it. But what's interesting to me with history is connecting it to you personally so that you can appreciate it better. My mother used to say, you don't have any history until you're old enough to have it. And that makes sense, quite frankly, because the older you get, the more history you have. And you can go, oh, geez, I remember that. My dad used to tell me about that. Can everybody hear me? I'm usually pretty good without a microphone. I just brought this out because I knew she had them out there. Anybody know this guy? Anybody? No? Nobody's jumping up. This is a guy by the name of William Lee. He was an attorney here in town for probably 50 years. Okay? And the reason I brought him out is because he lived in a house on East Street. It's something to connect the past with the present, which I think interests people when you can do that. There's another name I want to throw out. This happens a lot. There was another attorney here who walked these hallways for 50 years. I never knew him. I doubt any of you did. Anybody ever have anything done by an attorney Mumford? There's a lot of Mumfords still around Wayne County. Well, this attorney Mumford walked the hallways in this building for a period of 50 years. From 1883 to 1933, when he died. And he was not a politician, never was judge, he never was a district attorney at all, but he was someone who just, like we did for years, came to this building, did the people's work, and got on with business. And how I connect with him, okay, is that if you folks later tonight go walking into the park and look at that Civil War monument, you'll see two of his brothers. Okay? He lost two brothers in the Civil War, one at Chancellorsville and another one at Five Forks. So again, there's a piece of history that we all studied at one point, Civil War, that had a personal connection here with home. Now, I'm supposed to talk about how this courthouse and courtroom got to where it is today. And it was a fight and a half. It wasn't easily done. Starting in around 1867, there were a number of, what's the word I'm looking for now, Pete? Decisions by civil juries that told the judges. Grand juries. Grand juries, thank you very much. I was only here 43 years. That just skipped by me there. But anyway, a number of grand juries started saying, you know what, this courthouse we're dealing with just is not meeting our needs. Plus, it's unhealthy. It was small, it was cramped, and people had a difficult time conducting their business. So they started knocking on the door of the commissioners saying, hey, we need a new courthouse. New courthouses cost money. And so when the money talk started, suddenly divisions began, just like today. I can remember not too long ago when we were looking to build a prison, and we were in a group just like this. Don't build it in my backyard. Build it somewhere else. What's wrong with the old prison? It's suited us fine for 50 years. We can get another 50 years out of it. Well, the same kind of attitudes occurred with the courthouse. And so what we saw developing back in 1874 was two political parties, quite frankly, a pro-courthouse faction and an anti-courthouse faction. And what happened was the anti-courthouse people started filing lawsuits after the original bid was granted to get this another commissioner, believe it or not, originally, who was going to build the courthouse, for an injunction to stop the building of the courthouse. Now, because obviously it involved the current judge, they couldn't hear it in front of a guy by the name of Judge Charles Waller. And so they had to go back and forth down to Strasburg in front of Judge Dreer. Now, Judge Dreer, familiar name, folks, Wayne County. He's got himself a township named after him and also a fair named after him. It doesn't happen often. Try to get a fair named after you, right? But anyway, so they went back and forth with Judge Dreer, and the construction would start, and then it would stop. And then it would start, and then it would stop. And so it was kind of a mess for 2 years. But as time went on, during the times that they could build it, they built what they could. And it was getting to the point where they were building it around the existing courthouse. At the same time, business was being conducted. You can imagine what that was like. They actually used quarried stone from that wall of stone over there on Riverside Drive. They built a trestle from there across the river so they could ship a stone across and cut it for the purposes of the foundation here. You got to remember the geography of Honesdale at the time too. We didn't have these sunken rivers at the time. The rivers in Wayne County were level with the people's lawns. The reason Honesdale didn't get developed as quick as he did, because it was considered a marshland. It was a swampy mess down there in Dyeberry Forks. So anyway, excuse me. Lost my point. Oh, so they're fighting over the construction. The new building's getting built around the old building. They're fighting in court, and finally Judge Dreer hands down a ruling saying, build your damn courthouse. Well, at the same time, I swore I shouldn't do that. Edit that out, Jim. I don't know. So anyway, they start building and they start tearing down the old courthouse. Now again, the old courthouse was built right on the sidewalk. It was right on the street out there, okay? So we had ample room to build around it at the time, but we eventually had to start pulling the boards off the old one. But we still had to conduct court. So we couldn't do it in the old courthouse New courthouse wasn't ready, so we had to conduct it elsewhere. Anybody want to guess where? 2 places right here in town. I used to do this with, anyway, Liberty Hall, which everyone knows. Where's Liberty Hall? Still there. You walk down 9th Street? No, 10th Street. Is that 10th Street? 10th Street. No, that's 9th. Walk down the corner of 9th and Main Street, that's Liberty Hall. And on the 3rd floor, it's a wide open space, and that's where they would conduct court. At other times, they would conduct court in the National Hotel. Everybody knows where that is, right? These ladies do. You do. Anybody know where the National Hotel is? Still exists. The Quarters, right. So they had room enough in their ballroom to set up for court. So they'd bounce back and forth between those two hallways while this place was being built. Interesting to note, folks, at the same time, in 78, there was a election for county commissioners, and 2 gentlemen ran on the anti-courthouse platform, William Holbert and William Hartwell. Hope there's no relations here. Okay. But anyway, they ran on the anti-courthouse, but they had to deal with reality because they saw the old courthouse being torn down underneath them and a new one being built. So finally they relented and said, let's get this thing built. The irony to me is, as you people walk out of the building here, take a look at the commemorative stone up on the wall, because it has the names of the commissioners at the time, William Holbert, William Hartwell, and I believe a Joseph Riefler. So we have 2 guys who never wanted the damn building here to begin with, whose names are etched in stone for the remainder of however long the county lives. So anyway, what other things can I talk about? Let me see. The guy that actually built this place was a contractor known as A.S. Phillips. Not only known as, that was his name, A.S. Phillips. And he had quite a lot of experience building buildings here in Honesdale. In 1875, Honesdale suffered a tremendous fire. The Keystone Block, we call it, but it's the block that has Here and Now on it. It used to be the old Cotz's building. It used to be the old where Grant's is. That entire block went up in flames, okay? And A.S., what's his name? Phillips came in, and after they tore everything down, he was commissioned to build stone homes and stores. And if you go down, again, making history real, if you go downtown Honesdale today, go across the street now and look at the buildings. At one point in one of the tallest buildings, you will see engraved in stone 1875. And that was A.S. Phillips' mark for constructing those buildings. But he did a fine job here. He did bring the building in under budget. The building cost at that time $130,000. That doesn't sound like much. But again, in today's money, it's over $5 million, okay? It was quite a bit. So everybody's happy to go home, right? Nope, okay? Because it wasn't too long. Commissioners realized there were some problems. Now, I've become accustomed to talking pretty loud. And I would have made a good attorney back in the 1880s because I enunciate. I know that you're out there. Those 3 walls, if you look behind you, you see those 3 walls behind those pillars? They were never originally there. Those walls were gone, and the room was open to the back windows, the western windows, that are like these. And the purpose of that was to let the western sun in to gain as much sun as we could. So you had attorneys here looking this way, arguing with the judge, questioning the witnesses, And by the way, this angle that you see wasn't there. I mean, people sitting, everything, it was a flat auditorium, meaning there was no rise to it at all. So if you were in the second row, you didn't hear anything. You didn't see anything. So the commissioners reel back Mr. Phillips in and say, hey, can you fix this? And he says, sure, I can fix this. It's going to cost you $4,000. And he said, sure. So anyway, he fixes it by doing just what he did. He raised it up, and probably the floorboards underneath you folks are probably 1880 boards. But he raised it up so the acoustics became better, people could see, and people can hear. And this went all the way back. I had a great uncle who was an attorney here in town, who at one time was a district attorney, another time was a defense attorney. And he used to present cases here, and we have little segments of his, not his speeches, but how he knew he had to reach that person in the back seat way back there. And so you would have attorneys doing the classic enunciating back and forth so they could be heard. So anyway, we got the courtroom raised. Everybody's happy now, we can all go home, right? Nope, can't do that. Because what happened, A.S. Phillips showed up at the commissioners, say, pay me. And I said, well, we ain't gonna pay you. Okay, we think that should have been involved in the original bid. So we're not gonna pay you. So Phillips said, fine, I'll sue you. So they go to arbitration. Again, this has to be filed down in Stroudsburg because this judge would have recused himself. That's something judges did when there was an obvious conflict of interest. Somewhere along the line, that idea has gone out the window. But anyway, neither here nor there. Down in Stroudsburg, they all go down, and the Stroudsburg people says, pay him the damn money. Well, they still didn't want to pay him the money. They're negotiating back and forth, and finally they settle for $4,000 from Mr. Phillips. They finally shut up, he won, and away he went. This room is a beautiful room. The commissioners have done a fabulous job in terms of maintaining its historical significance, I believe, with the painting and with the trim and with the rugs. I haven't been here since these rugs that much. I know Nicole has overseen a number of the improvements within the courtroom here. When you look at the grand jury box, the various witness stands, the court stenographer's room and the judge's bench, and the jury box. Do we have any woodworkers here? You're a woodworker, sir? You are? Sure. Yeah. You work with chestnut at all? No. Can you find chestnut? No. If you found chestnut, would you pay the price for it today? Yeah? Yeah, you can't find chestnut. 1880, I had plenty of chestnut. This is all chestnut. It's beautiful wood and beautifully maintained. Got to give the commissioner a lot of credit for that. You see a witness or a jury. Somebody call a doctor. Jury box there. You see you know what this is? Grand jury box. Do we do grand juries anymore? Nope. A grand jury used to be where the people come in to run their government. And so the district attorneys would bring in a grand jury, as they do today. Usually it was 23 to 26 people. And they would present their case from this witness stand. And again, it was just the prosecution's case. It wasn't a defense case. But do I have enough evidence to go forward? Okay? And they then would decide whether or not, yeah, that's simple assault, or no, it's not. Okay? And they would issue either a true bill, okay, or no indictment. Well, gonna have to get some water sometime. So anyway, in the 1980s, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania gave the district attorney the option of kind of doing away with this, because it sort of made the public feel they were a rubber stamp. You know, the defense didn't have an opportunity and to object to anything. And so Nick Barna, who was DA at the time, he did away with grand juries. That jury box is the trial jury box, and that is the one where we have 12 people and 2 alternates to hear both civil and criminal cases. Okay? So if you didn't know. Not too long ago, we had a visitor in this courtroom that caused a little bit of concern. Didn't get a lot of PR. I don't know where the PR people were, but we didn't get a lot of PR on it. But anyway, this visitor came crashing through that window up there in the middle of the night and ended up 8:30 in the morning. I come walking in here, and here is this barn owl, all 3 to 4 feet of them, sitting out. Where do our fans go? Our fans gone. Oh, wow. Anyway, we used to have fans in here. They don't look up that much. And so there's this bird just sitting up there, happy as can be. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, sharp-thinking Steve Kanash goes down and gets the trusty phone book out and finds that Wayne County, believe it or not, has a raptor hotline. Did not know that we had a raptor hotline. So from now on, if you're having trouble with raptors, be advised that there's a hotline you can call. Well, anyway, we called the raptor hotline, and they said, yeah, get a broomstick, keep it moving. It'll get tired, and when it gets tired, it'll come down and land. And when it lands, put a garbage can over it and slide something under it and take it out, which we did. It got tired, it fell down, and we scooped her up, and away she went. But anyway, it's you know, in 1880, the first trial was conducted here in May of 1880. And since then, we've had God knows how many civil and jury trials held in here. How many people served on juries? Okay. Nicole, get all the names of the people. Kept their hands down. Jury service, we like to promote that, folks. It doesn't kill you. Right, jurors? We try to use your time as quick as possible and get you out of here as fast as possible. But then when you get selected, you find out that, hey, this is interesting. And we get a lot of feedback from jurors saying, hey, you know, put my name back in the barrel. We will, there's an example of history happening in my lifetime, okay? Anybody here ever been a jury commissioner? Anybody know a jury commissioner? Yeah, well, you cheat. Anybody knew Doris Freese? Come on, somebody knew Doris Freese. Doris Freese, all right, wave in hand. Doris Freese is the jury commissioner forever. Well, when I started, and for several years after, Doris Freese and her companion, whoever was elected at the time with her, would sit in the back, and when trial term came, they would have a barrel with 200-300 names in it. Number 1. Literally, it was the same way they selected juries as they did 200 years before. This whole business of computers and random selection and stuff, which we found out was pretty easy to do, struck us as kind of odd. Take a look for the names of Mumford on Elwyn. That's who, Elwyn Mumford was the attorney. I think his brothers was James and, I should be in that commercial. I found myself getting a little ragged in terms of my memory. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to work with Pete here. Pete knows his history back and forth and up and down. I told Pete I'll be your color man, and I would hope that people would try to make history personal to you. and make a connection between you and that historical figure, even if that historical figure wasn't historic at all. One last thing, and is it 7 o'clock yet?
Just about.
Huh?
7:03, 7:03.
7:03, look at that, pretty good. There was another attorney who I studied quite a bit. I can't remember his name either. Your great-grandfather.
Oh, Chester Garrett. Oh, Henry Wilson.
Henry Wilson. Henry Wilson. Henry Wilson was an attorney here from what? 1870s to probably 1913 or something like that.
He died, yeah.
He's Peter's great-grandfather. And he was like the head of the bar for so many years here in Wayne County. Very substantial guy. Served in the Civil War, came back, ran a newspaper, wrote the rules of court. Very successful career. He also had 4 children, and he outlived all 4 of them. Okay, which was not unusual in the 1880s. You know, you cut your arm, you're infected, you might die. You know. But on his tombstone over in Glendyberry Cemetery, it's a 4-posted tombstone. And if you scratch enough of the stuff away, which I've done on a couple of occasions, trying to get them all, after each daughter that he lost, he lost 3 daughters and a son, he would have a poem, or he'd have something that he wrote, or he'd have some little story, you know, ending with a rose that didn't get a chance to bloom kind of thing. And really, it really, you know, again, brings reality back to you. His son, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Pete, his son actually did live till his majority when he was 18. 18 or 19, was he? Or 20?
18, I think.
Yeah.
Bruce.
He dies pedaling his bike back from the Chicago World's Fair. He had gone to the Chicago World's Fair, coming back, he was probably pretty damn tired.
Yeah. Pneumonia.
Huh?
He suffered pneumonia.
Pneumonia? He contracted pneumonia and down he went. So he lost his only adult child there. So, you know, it makes history real, you know, when you can connect like that. So anyway, we appreciate your attendance here. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you continue to try to learn more about your local town, local businesses, local people. I'm feeling my chin here, and my wife's going to say something to me, but did you go home, honey? You didn't go home? Okay. Because if you went home, you would have seen on the chalkboard, Linus, don't forget to shave. And it's still up there. I'm not kidding. Anyway, folks, we appreciate your attendance here. Peter, you have anything more? Thanks so much again.